Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another We Can workshop. If it's your first time, we're so excited to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for taking the time because it's a beautiful day out there. It's June presently. If you're watching this on YouTube in the future, just to let you know, it is June and there are a million things that people could be doing today. But instead, here they are learning and furthering their businesses, investing in themselves. So high five to all of you for sure. My name is Carrie Ramsey. I'm the project manager for the We Can project, which is led by Queen's University and is funded by FedDev Ontario through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Ecosystem Fund. So it is so wonderful to have you all joining us today. As you know, we love to turn these learning sessions into networking sessions as well. So that Zoom chat, that is your playground today. I want to make sure that you put your name in there, maybe say hi to everyone, let them know what your business is. If there's a link or a social media account they can follow you on, please do that so that we can start to get to know each other. So right now in the chat, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to let everyone know where you're from geographically, as well what your business is. And while you're doing that, I will, as I always love to do at the top of our workshops, take a moment to acknowledge that I'm connecting to this workshop from the Bay of Quinte region. This is the traditional lands of the First Nations people, the Huron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. And I was watching a YouTube video earlier this week. It was a TEDx talk. I love to watch TED Talks and TEDx Talks, which are more of the regional ones. And this one was by Monique Grace Smith. I want to make sure I get her name right. Yes, that's correct. And she's an Indigenous woman who was speaking about resilience. And she was speaking about the 4 blankets of resilience was really the core of her TED Talk. And I'm going to put the link into the chat as well, if anybody would like to take a look at that. The name of the TEDx talk is Resilience and the Power of One. And I think if there's ever been a time that we need resilience, and you know, certainly within the Indigenous community as well, that is this is the day. And I think that it will also be a great encouragement to others who are looking and really digging into this theme of resilience right now, as we have been definitely over the last 18 months. So I will put that as a resource for you in the chat. For today, we are so excited to welcome back, by popular demand, Dionne Baker, who is a great professional in her field. She has taught us before about e-commerce. She's taught us about various topics, actually. And today, of course, she is going to talk to us about how to make an income with online courses. And so Dionne has been a colleague of mine for quite a while now, and it's such a thrill to welcome her back. So my understanding is there will be a Q&A pause at the end of each session, that Dionne will be doing. So hold on to your questions. I mean, if you have to share them in the Zoom chat because you just can't contain yourself, then go ahead. But do know that she's going to pause at the end of every section to make sure that we have our questions answered before we move on. All right, so that's sort of the protocol today. And if you would also just double check that your mics are all on mute. I'm sure they are. I can't hear anything at the moment, but we'd like to double check that. Welcome, everyone. So great to have you. Dionne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for welcoming me. I'm always so excited to do these trainings because I find the stuff that I teach, it is actually super valuable. And I always hear back from people afterwards saying, oh, wow, I learned so much. And then I started and now I'm doing this new thing. And what do you think about that? And that's one of my favorite experiences as a trainer, to see that, you know, the stuff that I'm teaching is actually being applied out there in the world as a result of having done these trainings. So I do have a jam-packed session today. It is sometimes a little bit like drinking water through a fire hose. There's a lot of information that will be coming at you. And as Carrie said, I do build into these little trainings the question tab or the question area after every single section of content that we go through. So without further ado, we're just going to hop right in. The first thing I always want to do is just have the disclaimer saying, I don't know how much money you will make online selling trainings, courses, or other knowledge-based materials. You might not make any. Nothing in this training is going to guarantee you income or sales, but what will create that income and those further sales later is usually what you do after the training ends. So how you apply the knowledge that you are obtaining during this time. So what are you going to learn today? Well, today we're going to talk about the 5 critical things you need to do before you actually try to sell your course or training. We're going to look at the 3 pieces of tech you'll want to master in advance of your course's start date, and what you can do if you're not super tech savvy. We want to look at the 3 most popular training or course delivery methods, AKA how most sellers deliver their courses online. And then we're going to look at 3 quick start strategies that you can use to test your course materials when you're first starting out. So before we start, I always like to preface by saying I want this to be an interactive workshop. So there is a section in here that is actually a workshop section where I want you to participate by typing in comments in the chat and things like that. Comments and participation will get people who stay until the end entered to win a 1-hour consultation call with me, where you can ask me any of the questions that you have related to your specific business as they relate to either online courses or e-commerce or even membership sites, all the things that I am well versed in. And that call is valued at $250 presently. So do keep that in mind as we're going through the content. So we're going to first start with this section about what to do before you start, okay? And it's really just 5 simple steps. I find a lot of people seem to get overwhelmed, kind of, especially when they're new, thinking about, okay, well, how am I even going to get into this whole online courses thing or training thing? You know, what do I need to do, right? And so the first thing you want to consider is how you're going to find the audience that's interested in the content that you're developing. So whether that's content where you're going to be teaching people lessons, like how to play piano or how to play guitar online, or it's content like brain fitness or, you know, doula or maternity content, no matter what you are the expert in or what your industry is, you want to make sure that you have access to an audience or you have awareness of where you can find the audience that's going to be interested in the courses that you're creating. The second step is to, of course, build your course outline. So you want to sit down and really think through all of the little steps or all of the pieces of content that you want to make sure are inside of this course. And you want to make sure that you're looking at it through the lens of somebody who doesn't know a lot about whatever it is you're teaching, right? So if you're going to be teaching beginning knitting classes, for instance, but you're an expert knitter, you might want to be asking some of the people who are just getting into knitting, what is the most confusing thing for them? Or, you know, what do they struggle with the most? So that you can make sure that you cover that content in your knitting 101 class. We are going to go in through a little bit more detail in all of these steps in the subsequent slides. So I'm just going to cover them kind of briefly, and then we'll jump into exactly what I mean when I'm saying these things. So the third step here is to create your course's content, including any of your videos, your workbooks, slide or presentation decks, any audio files that you might need in order to package this whole thing up. The fourth step is to choose your learning management system or your learning management platform and to register an account on either. And this can run the gamut as well. So a lot of the times the questions I get are around, well, do I start with a $20 a month platform or do I have to pay $200 a month? And we're going to get into that a little bit as we get through this content. And then the 5th step is to create your course marketing plan. And so basically this is the 5 steps that you'll go through every single time you're going to create any online course. And so a question that I often get here is people will say, oh, well, you know, you would use a different learning management system or a different platform for different courses. And the answer to that question is yes. It mostly depends on what you intend to do with your courses, the audience you intend to serve, and how you intend to market them. So we're going to get into a little bit more content here. And we're going to look at these steps in a little bit more detail. So step 1, in terms of finding your audience, the easiest way to find an audience for your course is to start where you've already got some connections, right? So example, selling a brain fitness course to young professionals could start by networking with contacts you already have on LinkedIn. If you're planning on entering an industry where you don't already have connections, the easiest way to find that audience is by creating free or low-cost content and posting it in the places where your target customers will be hanging out. So example, if you're selling a course for small business owners on how to create a content plan for their business, you might start with some free mini trainings marketed to Chamber of Commerce members in your local area, right? Or you could even reach out to some of the businesses that support other businesses in the area and see if there's a way for you to do a low cost or free mini training to access their audience, right? Building up your own network is one of the fastest and easiest ways to grow, not just for online courses, but I think in any business. I was on a training myself recently, and one of the trainers had said, your network is your net worth. And I thought that's a really interesting way to kind of look at it. But the truth is, it really does come down to a lot of the time who you know, right? And so you want to make sure that every opportunity you have to meet new people and to network with new people and to give people your business cards, let them know what you're the expert in. That's an opportunity for that person to share your name when something comes up for your business that you might be perfect for, right? So step 2, when it comes to building your course outline, your course outline should always just include the most important lessons or takeaways you want your students to leave with, okay? It should also include the order that those lessons will appear and the subtopics that you intend to cover in each lesson. Notes about the content type or the delivery method for each of these pieces of content that you're building into your course. Notes about the length of each lesson, and clarity surrounding how deep you're going to dive into each of the little mini topics that you intend to cover. So looking at this holistically, when I build my outlines, I always just kind of start with what are the key takeaways, right? What do I want people to learn? And that usually becomes the first part of the introduction that I'm giving on an online course is you will learn, just like on this one today, you will learn these 4 or 5 things, right? And that sets the tone for what people are going to expect to see coming out of that. Once you've actually kind of narrowed in on those topics, that also creates basically a very easy template for you to use in your marketing, right? You don't want anybody having some misconception that you're going to do a deep dive into content. So like if we're talking about the example of knitting for beginners, right? You don't want somebody thinking if you're just talking to beginners, that this is going to take them through every step from beginner to the advanced stage of knitting, purchasing, and then being disappointed when it's only got beginner content there, right? So clarifying exactly what takeaways the students can hope to get by the end of the training really helps just keep everything concise and make sure that everybody's on the same page headed in. When it comes into the content types, I always say you want to have at least 2, if not 3 different ways for people to learn. Because as we know, a lot of people learn differently. There are visual learners, there are people who learn by doing, and then there are people who learn by kind of reading and digesting information, right? So I always try to include a video file that people can watch where a lot of the times I will do some point and click to show people exactly the steps that they need to take to achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve. I usually turn that video file into an audio file and cut out those little tidbits or tutorials that are point and click. And then I usually do also have worksheets or workbooks that folks can do because that really helps some people solidify the information or the content that they've just learned. So for each of the little sections that you intend to include in your course, you want to make sure that you've got at least 2, if not more, ways that people can kind of interact with this content to get the most out of it. Next, it comes to the length of the lessons. So one of the major mistakes that I see a lot of beginners make is they will record an entire hour session, right? And it's not to say that this is not marketable, because it is. Obviously, there's a lot of people who sit down and watch the full hour or the full hour and a half. But a lot of the time as well, especially when people are paying to access a course, they kind of want things in more bite-sized, digestible chunks. And especially if the information that they're learning is kind of technical or is completely new to them, coming from a different field. So for instance, when I work with business owners on e-commerce, right? A lot of the times, if these folks have not built their own websites in the past or have not used a platform before to build a website, they're kind of going, oh my goodness, well, where do I even start? How do I start? And they're often questioning whether they have the tech skill necessary to achieve their end goal, right? So if I sit there for 2 hours on a video, teaching them everything I know on the basic level from A to Z, those people are going to become quickly overwhelmed, right? They're going to be scribbling notes furiously, maybe not paying as much attention as they need to be to the content, worried about missing something, and then not knowing where to find it again in that 2-hour video. Even if I create markers in that video, so you'll see this on YouTube where people create these little markers and it'll have a little tooltip that pops up when you basically hover your mouse over the marker saying, oh, it's this content or it's that content. Even if you create that, if the person on the other side of the screen isn't super tech savvy, doesn't know really how to use those markers or that they're there, that person might end up having to spend 6 or 8 or 12 hours of their time going back through a 2-hour video in order to glean that important information that they need from one section of that video. So from a user experience, the person on the other end of the screen isn't really getting the dedicated help they need if you're putting a bunch of that content into one giant video like that. Also, a consideration is when you film 2 hours of content all in one go, a lot of the times the file sizes for that content are huge, right? So you're going to have to be uploading these things to your choice of learning management system or learning management platform. And if you live in the country or in a rural area like I do, that can sometimes take days for files that are 500 megs or bigger, right? So you want to make sure that you're kind of thinking through, okay, lengthwise, maybe what you want to do as part of your course plan is have a bite-sized piece of content and then have an action step that you expect people to take before they move on to that next part of the video, right? And then the last thing we already kind of covered, which is clarity surrounding how deep you intend to dive into each topic. I'm somebody who could literally talk for days on any of the content pieces that I teach. I have so many things to say. I can answer all the questions. And because these are industries that I love so much, I'm lit up by it. Right? But the reality is people only have so much time and their expectation is they want to get that end goal that you've outlined in the very beginning as quickly and succinctly as possible, right? So that being said, all throughout your training, you should be kind of reiterating, okay, this is what I intend to teach you. If we're talking about subtopics that kind of fall out from the main area of focus, you want to just be reiterating, okay, these are the subtopics that you're learning as part of this section, okay? And that, again, just helps to keep everybody on the same page. There's no confusion about the kind of content that you're covering or how deep you're going to go. And a lot of the time, your students are actually grateful that you've done that so that they're not thinking, okay, I'm going to learn everything about video editing or everything about, how to play piano in, a 2-hour course. So step 3 is content creation. And a lot of the time, this is where people start to get overwhelmed or confused, right? Especially if you haven't been used to recording yourself or you've never really recorded your screen doing a point and click presentation before. For some of us, I know I only started using Keynote on my machine, which is what is being used to deliver this presentation. I only started using that when I started using Macs. And so for a lot of the time in my corporate career, when I was working in marketing and communications, my go-to source for these kinds of slide decks was PowerPoint presentations, right? I could do anything in PowerPoint and I'm like, wait, Mac has what? Right? This Keynote thing, now I have to learn this whole other software. And so a lot of the times you can start to feel overwhelmed when you get into the actual area of content creation, but it's actually easier than you think. You can create some high quality content pretty easily these days. Like for instance, the talking head videos, right? So the talking head videos are kind of like what I'm doing now, where in the end, once this is filmed and up, you will see my voice or my face and my voice talking to you about the content that I'm presenting on the screen, right? So you can film this using a digital camera, a smartphone, or even just your webcam. So in this case, where this is being delivered on Zoom, obviously Zoom is recording this, but how you see me, how we see any of each other is by using our computer's laptop built-in webcams for the most part, right? If you're doing point and click videos, again, you can film it using QuickTime on a Mac, or you can use a professional Zoom account and just click the record button. And again, you can just share your screen and it's going to actually follow your cursor as you point and click. And then if we're talking worksheets and workbooks, you can create these things on Canva, or you can even purchase templates on marketplaces like Creative Market or Envato and just change out the words and the pictures to make it branded to your specific course. I've gone ahead and just put into this slide some content resources for creation. Just, Carrie, can you just nod if you can see the little logos for each of these things? On my screen, our faces are above them. Okay, perfect. So each of these will actually link out to the different kinds of resources. But if you're new to content creation in general, there are always going to be a variety of free accessible resources that you can find for any of the tech companies out there that are servicing these kinds of marketplaces. So for instance, canva.com or canva.ca has this whole design school resource that you can use that's going to teach you how to use Canva as efficiently and effectively as possible. TechSmith, because they sell courses and they sell software and things like that to help make your life easier when you're doing recordings. They have step-by-step walkthroughs that will teach you how to record a video of yourself, what software you need to have installed on your computer, all of the different kinds of equipment that you'll need. And they also have stuff that teaches you how to do things like voiceovers. So if you wanted to, for instance, just record the screen or your presentation by clicking through slides, and then later you wanted to put your voice over top of it and kind of have the presentation running in the background, TechSmith is going to teach you how to do that step by step. And so there are a variety of different ways that you can learn this stuff without actually having to invest a lot of money. It's mostly going to take your time. Or if you have the budget, you can also hire some of this stuff out. There are always going to be freelancers who can do video editing for you, who can help you set up video and teach you how to record certain things. So then I'm just going to move on to the next one. The next step is to choose your learning management system or platform. And again, this is another task that I find a lot of folks who are new to online course creation or selling get a little bogged down by, right? And it doesn't have to be super challenging. My rules of thumb are you want to choose a system that works best for now and for growth later. And you can also self-host if you're tech savvy. There are a lot of systems that kind of plug into a WordPress website or whatever. You can use those as well. And a lot of those work brilliantly if you know what you're doing when it comes to editing your website, getting these things set up, integrating payment processors and things like that. But for the most part, the reason people like these learning management systems or learning management platforms so much is that it makes it that much easier. So I've gone ahead and linked to a few of these different ones. So for instance, teachable.com and thinkific.com are great if you don't need to brand or white label your entire platform. When you're paying for a professional account on either of them, you can obviously have some elements that have your branding on them. It's going to be a templated approach, and that template very much looks the same across all of the different courses on Thinkific or on Teachable. So as much as you're able to put in your logo, or you're able to kind of change some of the photos that you're using on your landing pages to support your specific brand, the actual template itself is very locked down, right? Udemy and Skillshare are great if you don't want to spend a lot of time doing your own marketing or you're not really sure how to, because when you put a course up on either of those platforms, the platform itself markets to their user base what new courses are available from new teachers just like you. Oops, I hit the wrong button here. I'm like, I need to hold on and get back out of this one. There we go. Can you guys still see my slides? Yeah, okay. So then Gumroad and Podia are great for beginners and bite-sized digestible courses and content. So if your course is overall no longer than maybe 2 or 3 hours, these are cost-effective platforms that you can just kind of put your course up on. They have a payment gateway. It's kind of like a no-frills solution, and it makes it super easy for you to get started without spending a huge amount of money. And then of course you've got the huge platforms that are well known in the industry, like Kajabi and Vimeo. And these are quite expensive, but these are longer term solutions. So for instance, I have a Teachable account right now for certain courses that I run. And I also have a Kajabi account for my membership website, right? And so this is what I meant earlier when I said sometimes you'll be using a blended approach of 2 different platforms. I could run a lot of the same courses that are on my Kajabi on my Teachable and vice versa, but I just find I like to have a lot of different, I guess, brands kind of running different courses, right? So for my membership site, for me specifically, I work with 2 other coaches on an e-commerce membership website. And we do things a little bit differently than I do in my own business for ShopBoss Secrets, right? When I'm teaching certain content, right? So I like to do a lot of point and click stuff. They like to do a lot of live question and answer stuff. And because the strategies and how you make those 2 things successful are very different, we find we need different platforms for that very similar end goals, okay? So there's a couple of things you want to note about learning management systems and learning management platforms. You'll want to pick the one that best suits basically what your content is going to be when it comes to setup and uploading and hosting, okay? And so this is kind of what I was touching on a little bit in the last slide. So for instance, I sell a course called the Etsy Crash Course, and I sell some courses regarding Shopify setups on my regular Teachable account. That's actually under the brand name ShopBoss Secrets, okay? And then separately, I work with other coaches at this other company called Ready, Aim, Scale, right? And we set that up on Kajabi. Now, the difference between the 2 is that on Teachable, it's a little bit more challenging to run a membership site where people can actually have a community. They can ask the questions. Everyone can see the same questions, all of that. You can open up like commentary for the video and stuff that you upload on Teachable, but it's just not as engagement focused or community focused as the options that exist on Kajabi, right? So for the membership platform, we actually run that on Kajabi. It has its own video library, very similar to what you would experience with a Teachable account. But the nice thing is it's got this whole other section that is just community, where people can start threads about certain content or topics that they want to learn more about. They can leave comments on videos, and other members of the community can answer those comments or can have conversations about those videos. And they can like and love and share things, very similar to how, you know, Facebook groups might work. And so when we're talking membership, because one of the major concerns is churn, naturally, a membership site lends itself to a group or community platform a little bit better than it does just an online course platform, okay? If you're not tech savvy, you can also hire a professional like me or a virtual assistant to help you with uploading, laying out your content, and doing all the things you need to do on your specific chosen LMS or LMP. Okay, this is actually a great way to get started when you're not tech savvy. If you work with a professional like me who's helping you build websites, A lot of the time, what I do for my clients is I film little video courses, in a sense, that will teach them how to do this stuff later on. So let's say, you've already got people lined up waiting to buy this course that's going to come out from you, but you just have no idea really how to get this course online, how to make the landing pages look pretty, how everything integrates. And honestly, maybe your business is so busy that you really want to do this course, but you don't have a lot of time to apply to the learning and the setup of these things. You can hire someone like me who's going to create a content plan for you, who's going to basically tell you what videos you need to film in what order. And then as you get those videos done, is going to edit them to make them look professional and then put them up on your LMS for you, so that by the time you've gotten through recording of all of your content or the creation of all of your content, you've actually got maybe a week left by the time you're ready to just start selling that content online, right? Or you can hire a variety of freelancers or VAs to do bits and pieces of this stuff for you, right? So say you're savvy enough to actually record yourself and you know how to do a little bit of the video edits. Maybe you've taken a video course or something like that have taught you those things, but you just don't know how to organize this properly on the back end of Teachable or on Thinkific, and you don't know how to change your landing pages or things like that. You can always hire somebody else who can help you with that, so that you're doing some of the work and you're managing your budget most effectively. This is a pro tip. You want to keep your content somewhere other than just on your LMP or LMS in case you choose to switch providers later. So this is a huge mistake that I see beginners make. They just dump all of their content onto, let's say, Teachable, okay? And then all of the inputs they used when creating that content, so all of their final videos that are then uploaded to Teachable, maybe because they need some room on their computer or they think, I'm not going to need to use this again, they delete all of those files thinking, oh, I can just download them from Teachable or download them from Thinkific later and move them if I need to switch platforms. Then it comes time to switch to that platform and they realize, oh, I can't do that. There's no way for me to re-download all of this content that I had put up. And now I don't have the original source files. So now in order for me to move, I'm going to have to refilm this entire course, which sucks, right? That's a lot of time and effort that's going to go into doing this videos all over again. And then on top of that, if you were intending on bringing all of the people over who might have purchased that course on your existing platform, those new people are not going to have a completely new course, right? That essentially they're not going to have to pay for. So if you did that original course and it's kind of evergreen material, and now things have changed a slight bit, so you're talking about different pieces of content or different topics, technically you'd want to be able to charge for the newer course. But if you don't keep your content somewhere, you're basically going to have to grandfather some of these folks into that new course if you said they'll have access to it forever for free. So these are things that you want to think about in advance. It's just a great idea to buy a portable hard drive, or if you have cloud storage that you can get, to just keep all your course content there. And there are actually some really fun tools that you can get to smush, I call it smush, your course content. So for instance, like I was saying earlier, some videos end up being huge in size when you export them from your video editing software, right? And so a lot of the times, especially if you're hosting this stuff on a website, you don't need it to be as high quality or as huge in terms of the video size as you would in way back in the day when you were going to maybe burn this to a DVD and sell those DVD copies somewhere for somebody to use on a giant screen. In most cases, people are going to access your courses on a computer, on a laptop, on a desktop. So it doesn't need to have, the ability to scale to like 55 inches for a TV screen or even a projector, right? So there are tools that you can use. One of my favorite ones is called Handbrake, and you can just upload basically your video into that software and click the optimize to web button in that software. And it's going to actually smush your video files to make them way smaller, way more accessible, and you're not going to lose very much quality at all, right? So just things to think about when you're talking about storing your inputs on a cloud, or even just, figuring out ways to save space on your computer if your intention is to do multiple different courses over the course of time. So step 5 is creating your course marketing plan. Naturally, once you've gotten through steps 1 through 4, it is time to figure out exactly how you're going to be marketing this course. And so, like any good marketing plan, yours should include your unique value proposition, AKA, why should somebody buy this from you versus buying it from somebody else in the marketplace that's selling a similar course. A breakdown of your customer avatar, which is basically just information about the audience you intend to target with your courses, including their demographics and personality attributes. An engagement plan for how you intend to get new eyes on your courses when they launch and afterwards. And that should also include how you intend to use social media or email marketing, or even just, promoted ads, and how you intend to kind of grab these people's attention. So whether you're going to run free or low-cost beta courses, if you're going to have some other additional content that you're filming, and then a call out to the paid course that they can get if they like the content that you're sharing, all of those sorts of things. You also want this plan to include your budget, aka how much money you intend to spend, either on your video production, your content creation, or just your promotion budget. And then some initial key performance indicators. So what things will be happening that show you that your efforts are actually being successful? So for example, if you post, a blog post on your website, and then you link to that blog post on Pinterest, and on Pinterest, you kind of condense this into the top 5 things you need to learn about video editing to have a successful course, okay? So it's a list of 5. Somebody clicks on that, comes into the website where you kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive on those 5 things. And at the very bottom of that blog post is that if you love this content, check out my course. It's only $20. And they're going to click on that and maybe go see what your course is. You want to know, okay, well, how am I going to follow the trail of that? So how many views on Facebook equal 1 click through to the website, which also equals how many click-throughs to the course. Do I need to move this call to action into the middle of the blog post? You want to be paying attention to these things and creating a list of checkpoints for yourself to keep an eye on to make sure that your efforts are actually paying off, because it takes a lot to create that blog post, to create the graphic that you're going to put up on Pinterest, to figure out the exact right words that you want to use for your call to action at the end of that kind of free promotional content. And so if it's not worth it, like if it's not working, you don't want to just be repeating the same thing over and over again, hoping that magically it's going to start to work, right? So you definitely want to have some key performance indicators in there for you to assess, and then a pivot plan. So what do you intend to change if the tactics that you intend to use on your marketing don't actually drive the interest or drive the traffic that you're trying to make happen, okay? So it should include also understanding, is it the course itself? Is it the way that this is presented or laid out? You just want to make sure that you do a deep dive into your market research to be sure that A, the course that you're creating in the first place is something that the market actually wants, and B, that it's laid out in a digestible enough format that people don't feel overwhelmed, getting into the content, that it's very clear and easy for them to get signed up on whatever your platform is, and that all that kind of stuff is working synergistically so that basically you can create a funnel or a flow of traffic that's actually generating you income. So we have finished that first content section, and now I'm going to see if there's any questions. If you do have questions, feel free to just go ahead and type them into the chat, or you can raise your hand and unmute and ask them live as well. Okay, so Lisa, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Dionne. Thank you so much. This is really informative for me. You talked about plugins that you can use in your website. Are the examples of the learning management systems that you spoke about, do they all have plugins that you can actually integrate into your website?
So it all will depend on the website provider that you're currently using. Most of the most used or most tested plugin providers are kind of made for WordPress websites. So there's things like MemberPress. There's a whole variety of them, and I can actually send out a list if that will make things a little bit easier. But not all of the actual learning management platforms have plugins, right? So the difference between a learning management system and a learning management platform is that the platform, so like the Teachables, the Thinkifics, the Kajabis, the Podias, all of those are managing what's essentially a marketplace, right? So you're going to pay them to basically use a little section of the software that they have developed and to brand that to your specific needs, right? When we're talking about learning management systems, again, there's kind of two models. There's the plugin model where you can just grab a plugin and put it on your website if you're using WordPress mostly, or a custom WordPress based site, right? And that's usually a one-time cost or an annual cost to use that plugin and get the support from it. And then basically from there, you're on the hook to set up all of the content, to make sure everything's working, to kind of manage the back end and the user experience of that. Then also with a learning management system, you have the option of kind of, again, plugging into a platform in a sense where they're going to sell you a software that you can usually plug into a website. If it's not via an app where you're literally going to put the app on your website and that's going to kind of talk between the content that lives on the learning management system and your site, you can actually just have a separate little login link on your site that directs people to your learning management system of choice, right? So it mostly, it's a roundabout answer, but it mostly depends on what you're currently running on in terms of your website, how you will link these things together.
So sorry, so if I have a WordPress site and we have a couple of sites, but most of the learning is directed at clients who use our software. So their clients already paying for the software, and it's just making sure that they can get help easily through various things. But there's also an opportunity to teach other people about chemicals, safe chemical management outside of our clients. So if I want flexibility to use the same content for both groups, then it would be a platform would be a better choice then?
I would say probably what you'd be actually looking for is something more like a client portal. And so you can there's one literally called Client Portal. And what it is, you can it's a plugin that you put onto your WordPress website, and it creates these little client accessible places on your website that basically a client will have to have their own login and password in order to access. But you can have a variety of course material in there that is self-driven, right? So you can label it, you can section it off differently so that, different topics can kind of live under different banners or different headings. But essentially you're creating a client portal, which will have a course library for all of your existing clients. Now, if you're talking about kind of selling things to different clients who are not already licensing or paying for your software, you would probably want to have a separate platform. And this is where we talk about having two different systems kind of running sometimes very similar content, right? Because you want people to be able to pay to access that content if they're not your clients. And you probably are giving this content to your clients for free because they're already licensing your software, right?
Yes.
So you can either do it by having, that client portal area that's just for existing clients. And then you can have another plugin that's like a MemberPress or a learning plugin of some form for WordPress that's going to manage payment for that exact same content. You're going to upload that content twice, so it lives in two different sections. but ultimately you can manage it all through plugins, or you can choose a learning management platform to host the paid stuff, so that basically you're not having to manage too much on your main website. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and I see that Catherine has her hand up, but we also had a couple of questions in the chat, first of all, that I want to get to, which is really just around this idea of how do you choose a topic? I think that Cassia had put her hand up in the chat. Any quick tips on choosing content?
Yeah, so
topics.
Absolutely. So when it comes to choosing topics, I always tell people to start with what you know, right? So it could be what you know in terms of like, maybe you are, I don't know, a software developer, but you also are a heavy crafter, okay? And you make crocheted and knitted things, and you can craft any fun little thing, and you're trying to teach people how to bond with their kids over crafting, right? Completely different industry from what your career might be. The idea is you already know a lot about crafting, you already know maybe a lot about organization of all of your materials, different crafting techniques, that sort of things, and how to keep your kids engaged and involved in doing this as like little family projects, right? So that's an easy one. You always kind of want to start with the things that you're already interested in or that you already know a lot about, right? So a key mistake I do see is a lot of folks kind of will find a guru that says, oh, if you know a little bit about a subject, you already know a lot more than somebody who's brand new to that. Go ahead and create a content or create some courses around that and sell it, because you're in advance of the beginner. And I kind of think that that's a bad strategy to start with, just because sure, you might be a little bit ahead of a beginner or a novice in that area, but when it comes to some of the more pointed or pertinent questions that somebody might have about that content later on, you're not going to be in the best place to answer those questions or to provide the support for those course attendees that you might want to. So truthfully, pick something pick something you're interested in. It can be a lifelong hobby that you've had. It can be, something related to your career. It can be even a function of your career that you've done for years. Like when I was working at General Motors, I did a lot of training. Training technically wasn't part of my job title, but a lot of the tips and tricks and tactics and software that I used later on to create my online courses, I learned how to use it in my corporate job at General Motors. So technically, I could teach a whole class about how to do video editing, how to do, how to use software like Camtasia, or to use Mac software to record your own courses, right? I don't, but it is something that I know enough about that I could teach it. People would enjoy it. People would be able to utilize that. And if there was questions, I'd be expert enough to answer all of those questions that came up during the course of that course. I hope that helps to answer your question. Was there a part two of that question?
Well, just for sake of time, let's go to Catherine, and then we'll circle up, and I encourage people to respond in the chat if you have thoughts, as I'm doing as well, because that helps everyone get involved, which is great because everyone has great ideas. But Dionne, Catherine, go ahead and maybe ask your question.
Hi, so my question is, if you're doing like Kajabi and you also have a self-host, so like I use Wix, for example, for my website, and you have a blog as well, so I have a blog on my website, where do you think is like the best way to drive traffic? Like, should I be driving it to my website, like my self-host, or to a Kajabi?
So I don't love to drive any traffic to a platform specifically. I always drive it to my website first, and then from the website over to the other thing that I own. And the reason for that is the more traffic you can drive to your specific site, the better your ranking is for those keywords that you're using on your site in search engines, right?
Yeah.
So if you're giving away all of your traffic by kind of giving it to the platform, then you're not actually ending up building your own kind of digital asset in your own website.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then I think there was another really quick question. So if you've got many possible topics you could teach, how do you decide which topic to do first, which is kind of just related to the last question. And traditionally, it's through market research. So I kind of look out into the marketplace and I see where the gap is. That's my favorite way to figure out where I'm starting when I've got a variety of different ideas swimming around in my head. So there's always going to be a section in the market that doesn't have enough content for a specific thing, right? So for instance, there's a lot of places that will teach you how to have an Etsy shop, or how to have a Shopify website, or maybe even how to get started with Squarespace, okay? But there's not a lot of places, like the reason my course or my membership site has been so successful is there's not a lot of places that will teach you how to make all of those things work together. So if you want to Etsy, you want to Shopify, you also want to sell on a bunch of different maybe print on demand providers like Redbubble and Spreadshirt, there's not a lot of places out there that are teaching you the strategy to make, you know, all of those things work, to get sales on all of them, and to make that whole process as effortless as you possibly can, or as streamlined as you possibly can. So you're not spending hours and hours and hours and hours making different things for different platforms, right? So that's a gap. I looked at it into the marketplace and I thought, okay, I see this course for this specific platform, that specific platform, another specific platform. Naturally, all of those platforms are creating content about how to use their specific platforms, but there was nothing teaching people how to tie that all together so that they can have kind of a passive income situation where they upload things once, it goes out on 5 different platforms, and then they don't have to worry about it again. Right? So I'd say doing some quick market research, like, so if we use the example of even knitting or crafts or something like that, if you go in and we're talking about, okay, I want to create a knitting 101 course or something like that, you're going to go into your knitting groups, you're going to see the questions that pop up the most, right? And if you're thinking about, oh, do I start with teaching people how to knit a sweater, or do I start with teaching people how to knit those cute little funny animals that people give as gifts, right? Like, well, what are the most people wanting to learn in the groups that you're going into? What are the questions that are popping up most related to, right? So I was going to do a workshop of this, but I'm being a little bit more verbose than usually I intend to. So I think we're still going to do the workshop element of it, but I like it to run a little bit more quickly so we can make sure that we get through the rest of the content. So I'm going to say, let's pretend we're building a course together right now. I'm going to ask you to type in to the chat a course name and an audience. So basic knitting for new moms, or event planning 101 for business coaches, something like that. And then we'll just pick one and we'll run through some ideas for each of the steps outlined in the 5 steps together. So go ahead and type that into the chat. And once there's 2 or 3 in there, I will take, woo, that one sounds fun. Okay, so we've got busting through chronic inflammation. We've got 3 steps to dressing for success. Learn how to use power tools for busy moms. Cool, this is very cool. Okay, so the one that just really popped out to me, because literally I was going to use this as an example when I was building this course deck, is learning how to dress for success. Okay, so 3 steps to dressing for success. So if we're going to create an online course that's going to give people these steps to dress for success, we want to kind of get through obviously our 5 steps. So the first thing is, where can we find an audience for this course? So who is it that we think, and again, just type it into the chat, whatever you think the answer is here. Who is it that we think most needs content about how to dress for success? I'm going to make a guess that it's probably professional women, right? People who, yeah, corporate professionals, perfect, right? And I'm going so far as to say it's usually women who really care about this stuff. It's not necessarily true that men don't care about it, but it's a lot easier for men in a sense where, you know, they can just put on a nice suit, and if they have 7 nice suits that they can rotate through every day, they're fine. You know, no one's expecting men to be fashionistas. I'll put it that way, right? So we're in this place where it's young professionals, it's professional businesswomen, it's people who are at corporations, okay? And so what are the three most integral pieces of content that this course would need to have? Well, I'm gonna say dressing for your body shape, right? So a lot of the time, when are people really experiencing this problem? When they're transitioning careers, so say they came out of a certain industry and now they're in a different industry. When they're coming back from a leave of absence, maybe it's a maternity leave or a paternity leave, right? Or when there's been a change in their body and now they're trying to learn how to dress the most appropriately and still feel great in their clothes, right? So we're probably going to have all that stuff. So during the pandemic, dressing professionally from the waist up, I love it, Carrie. But that's the thing. So ultimately, what are the three most important pieces of content? Well, I think there's definitely the dressing for your body type. I think B is probably, the difference between like purchasing pieces that will last you forever, right? And fast fashion, right? Which way should you go on a budget, right? And then I think probably the third one is timeless looks or kind of timeless looks that will always work, right? Like timeless outfits to use in a pinch, right? So that gives us our baseline of the three most important things that we want people to take away. And so what order should those three pieces appear in? Well, dressing for your body type, I think, is probably the most important one, right? So you're going to want to teach that first, because then outfit composition in terms of patterns or colors or things like that really matters if you're not dressing properly for your body type, right? So I think you start with the dressing for your body type, you kind of move into outfit composition or three kinds of outfits to use in a pinch. And then, the third consideration is budget, where to spend and where to save, right? That's because in that order, the course content kind of builds on itself, right? So you learn the basics of dressing, then you learn, okay, what can I do if I'm in a pinch really quickly and I haven't planned my outfit for tomorrow and it's a really important meeting? And then you learn, okay, when I'm out there shopping and seeing things, what is going to help me the most in terms of investing versus what can I just kind of throw into my closet to hit a trend, right? Also understanding the culture. Yeah, absolutely. That's true, Sheila. So then how will we create the content for this? Are we going to hire someone? Are we going to DIY this? I think in this case, it could be a really fun DIY kind of content, right? Where you would have maybe you and a couple of your friends who have different body shapes and different styles, right? Go through some elements of, okay, this is my go-to favorite outfit, why it works, why it doesn't, you know what I mean? All of that kind of stuff. And I think it kind of hits a larger market, and that if you've got a couple different body types, right, then people can see how maybe the same outfit looks on different body shapes and sizes, how we can change that same outfit to accentuate different pieces of each of our bodies and still look great. And it's kind of accessible to anybody who might fall into those categories, right? So the next step is, where do you want to host this? Well, I think personally, this is the kind of course that would be great for a learning management platform. And it's because I don't want to have to mire people with like downloading this content. I don't want them to have to access it and then only be able to use it on my website. I want to be able to put it up on a platform. And then if that goes viral and I get 3,000 people in one day coming to take that course, I know that platform can handle it. Nothing's going to break. Everyone's going to get through it and it's going to be great. And then how are we going to get the audience interested in it? Well, there's tons of fashionista groups. There's tons of fashionista posts on places like Pinterest. And I mean, even if we're looking at things like TikTok and Instagram right now, if you go through and you see people just posting photos of outfits that they're wearing that are inspirational to other people who might not have tried that shirt or might not have paired a big chunky knit with, a giant loud pattern, you know what I mean? There's so many different ways to get an audience interested in that specific content. So just kind of choosing which one you intend to start with and applying yourself to that end goal. So the next step that we want to get through here is 3 pieces of tech that you'll want to master for each of your courses. The good news is these tech pieces shouldn't break the bank. So if you're planning to DIY your first course or a few, which most people do, because we don't have, starting out a lot of the time, a $15,000 budget to put together our first course kind of situation, you'll want to kind of look at these different pieces of tech. So for live course delivery over a social media platform, so this is when, I could be teaching this exact course, but I could also be streaming it to my YouTube at the same time. So it's live, and also streaming it to a Facebook group, right? A private Facebook group. To do that, the 3 most important pieces of tech you need are obviously a strong internet connection, streaming software that can live stream to your social media accounts of choice, and a laptop with a webcam and an internal microphone, so that everything's built into this one system and you're not having to worry about, plugging in your microphone, plugging in your camera, and that taking away from how your computer functions, okay? For video course creation, students will access via an LMS or an LMP. The top 3 pieces of tech you'll want to invest in are a laptop with a webcam and internal microphone, right? Computer-based screen and video recording software like Camtasia if you're on Windows, or QuickTime. And the nice thing about QuickTime, if you're a Mac owner, is that this is built into your Mac, okay? So ultimately, you can just literally open QuickTime. It comes with all of the other software that's standard on Macs, and you can start recording yourself, making videos and doing screen recordings just like that, using basic software that's on your Mac. And video editing software like iMovie, Adobe After Effects, Streamlabs OSB, something like this. Now, if you're just starting out, I always suggest to go with something that makes it easier for you. So Streamlabs, for instance, makes like video editing so easy. It's like kind of a point and click software. You drag your files in, it shows you little tutorials while you're in there about how to clip things, cut things, how to add fade-ins and fade-outs and titles. And then a lot of the time they have a whole library of different kinds of transitions that you can use. So you know how on YouTube, sometimes you're watching a fun video and then it does like a blocky transition into the next scene of that video, or they point at something and then magically something happens in the corner of the screen. All of that is very easy to learn inside of Streamlabs OSB. People also love Camtasia, and Sheila's in here in the chat saying, I love Camtasia. It's another software that once you learn, you can use that over and over and over again for years to come. And so it's just, you want to assess your level of ability to learn this stuff, right? So if you're absolutely brand new, you have never shot a video, you have never edited a video before, maybe spend some time on the websites for the software you intend to use. So on the Camtasia site, on the Streamlabs OSB site, in their blogs, seeing how easy it appears to be. Maybe watch a couple of videos on YouTube and see if that's going to be something that you feel comfortable trying to do. Naturally, you are only going to learn by doing and trying, right? But if you're on a specific timeline and you need certain things out the door, it might also be just as pertinent for you to just hire somebody to do this, whether it's a consultant, whether it's somebody on Fiverr, to just kind of do a quick video edit for you. And then at least you have a professional video at the end of the day, okay? A pro tip, you can also often create downloadable audio content using the exact same software that you use to edit your videos. And usually it's just a setting when it comes to the exporting. You just export your audio as opposed to exporting your audio attached to a video. So then to create a video course from a live training, the 3 pieces of tech you need are, again, a laptop with a webcam and an internal microphone, meeting software that can record your live meeting like Zoom. So Carrie's recording this live training right now. And if later on WeCan was like, oh, hey, we've got all 8,000 trainings that we've done over the course of 10 years, and you can buy them all, right? Like if that was a thing that happened later, this is exactly how you would do it. You would record this on Zoom. You would then put all of those recordings into a library somewhere behind a paywall, and then people would have to pay to be able to access that library, right? And then slide deck software like Keynote or PowerPoint, which is what I'm using to deliver this content today. And again, so Keynote comes standard on the Mac. PowerPoint, I know you do have to pay for as part of, the Microsoft product offerings, but you can actually record your slides going automatically on either of this software, or you can play them in browsers to make the recording experience a little bit different as you get through. So then the pro tip for this one is when you record inside of an account like Zoom and you kind of put it up to the cloud, on Zoom specifically, you can automatically share your replays by just going into your recordings on your cloud and making the link shareable. So earlier this year, I had the pleasure of doing a 6-week coaching program with WeCan and Queens. And this was exactly how I shared my replays. I also had a website that was built specifically for my course participants where I would put those links. So if they lost the email or deleted it, they could just go to the website and click the replay button. And magically, as long as they had the password, they'd be able to replay those videos. But ultimately, it makes it so much easier when you're using professional software like Zoom, because then you're not having to necessarily worry about downloading and then re-uploading, especially if you're in a place with dodgy internet, right? So what if you're not tech savvy, right? If you're not the most tech savvy, but you still want to try this out as a DIY project, most of the software providers actually have point and click how to learn content on their websites. And so Zoom has this, StreamYard has this, Streamlabs has this, right? And so in this slide, in basically all of these things link out to those specific libraries. So if I just share this here, are you seeing the new Zoom screen? Did it pop up?
No, not yet.
No?
I think
Okay.
I have to make you co-host again. So just a moment.
No, that's okay. But that's the thing. I will share the slides so you don't have to worry about that actually. I'll just go ahead and share the slides after, and then you guys can click through and see exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to some of these libraries, because these software providers invest a lot of money in making these kind of training libraries for their users so that it's easy for all of you to learn, or all of us to learn exactly how to do what we need to do with their software, right? And so you want to take advantage of that whenever you're trying to DIY something. You don't necessarily need to be Googling it and kind of sifting through a sea of YouTube videos or anything like that. Because if you go direct to source, they're going to have their own videos. They're going to have their own training. They're going to have their own audio that you can listen to, and maybe experts that are going to walk you through doing all of the cool things that you need to do in order to make your course the best it can be. Okay. Then separately, if you don't want to DIY, I touched on this earlier, but this is where a good virtual assistant will come in handy. They can help you do a variety of different things, like create your presentation deck, send out your live training reminder emails, schedule your meetings on Zoom or StreamYard or Streamlabs, control all of the administrative parts of the training or meeting itself, and upload your training or recordings to your LMS or LMP of choice. And so we're in this place of, if you really don't know how to do this and you don't have the time to learn, virtual assistants are great for this. And a lot of the times they're already doing this for other clients. So they're experts when it comes to changing the slides or, making sure that the emails are going out and doing all these things. So if you've got the budget to work with one for some of these trainings, especially if you've already kind of sold this training because people already know you as the expert in this industry and are just waiting for you to drop a course so that they can take it, right? Then you should have some budget to pay a virtual assistant to help you in these ways, right? And even then, a lot of the times, if you're working with a consultant like me, or you're working with a virtual assistant, you can actually ask them to create maybe a mini training for you that's going to teach you how to upload your own specific stuff or teach you how to use your software that you're already paying for, right? So these are easy ways to kind of learn as you go. Again, questions?
There was a question earlier about pay systems. So I don't know if you want to address that now. It was, sorry, I've lost it now, but maybe the person can mention it unless I can find it.
Pay system. So
it was me, Sheila. I was just curious. You had talked about Shopify, and I don't know much about the different systems. Is there any that are better than others for? I put some other ones, Stripe and PayPal, and I think there's one called Square. I don't even know what they all are, but I've heard different ones exist.
For sure. So the different payment providers or payment processors is what we call them. They kind of exist for different purposes, right? So you can use PayPal to charge for a course. If you've got a PayPal account, a professional account, they let you create certain subscriptions or what are called pay now buttons. And so basically people would click that button, they'd be directed to PayPal. They can either pay via their PayPal account or they can put in any major credit card to pay for the course. And then you can even set that up in PayPal so that once the payment is correct and charged, it redirects to the course landing page where basically they'll be able to log in and start self-directing, right? Those payment integrations are traditionally only going to be things that you set up if you are either self-hosting your training solution or you are kind of self-managing it. So when I say self-hosting, so if you're intending on using a plugin for your WordPress site, right? And so all of those videos are going to then live on your WordPress site, and these people will need to have accounts set up and access given to them to access certain sections of your site, right, that are hosting those videos. Naturally, you do need a payment integration or a payment provider that acts as the paywall that stops people from just being able to access that for free. And that also kind of triggers the system or the plugin that you set up to set these people up with a username and password and direct them to where they can access your content, right? So a lot of the times, places like Teachable and Thinkific, you can just connect them to a bank account, or you can connect them to, your own PayPal, and they will just pay you out into that bank account because they manage the payment integration for you. Then, if you're self-hosting, again, you would register your own PayPal or your own Stripe, and you would integrate depending on what your plugin accepts as a payment provider, okay? When we're talking about doing this kind of thing in a self-hosting level, you want to be tech savvy, or you want to hire this out. You don't want to be, this is not something that you want to DIY your first time out, okay? And the reason for that is if something goes wrong, you're not going to be able to figure it out quickly, and it can really sidebar your entire launch. So if you've spent some money running ads, or you've spent a lot of time getting an audience excited to go through your course, and then they land on your self-hosted solution and nothing works, right? You're not going to have the same level of motivation that returns a second time, right? So you just want to make sure that if we're talking self-hosting and we're talking about self-integration of these things, you might want to hire that out if you're not tech savvy and you've never done it before. Or in the very least, if you're going to follow the tutorials that teach you how to do it, you're going to want to test to make sure that those things are working exactly as they should be before you ever let somebody live come through, okay? Okay, so then I'm just gonna get through the rest of this content here. So the 3 most popular course structures, okay? So how people set up their courses and training programs for the most success. There are 3 super popular ways. One is a self-driven, previously recorded training structure. So this is something that, again, you give a live training. Oh, no, sorry. You would do previously recorded trainings. So you would spend time with your slide decks, recording yourself, editing these videos, uploading them onto an LMS or an LMP, and then it's a private course library that exists that has been previously recorded, and you're going to sell that to people, okay? The second is the live point in time trainings like this one, where you're allowed to watch a replay after the training at your leisure if you're not able to attend live. And this is the exact structure that we can use this for all of their live trainings, right? The expert shows up point in time, and then the replays go up on the YouTube channel so that folks can watch them later. If you were charging for this, naturally, you wouldn't be putting your replays up on a YouTube channel. Maybe instead, what you would be doing is hosting those replays on either a website, or you'd be putting them into an LMS or an LMP. And if you're doing it Zoom, right, you could literally just be setting a password and sending this out via email after every instance of your live trainings, right? So there's a variety of different ways to kind of affect success using that model. And then there's the disappearing content trainings, where the content is traditionally delivered live and replays are only accessible for a limited time after that content is delivered. And so naturally, each of these 3 different kinds of trainings have pros and cons, and we're just going to look at those together really quickly. So the pros of the self-driven, previously recorded training model are that it requires less live in-person public speaking. So you can really put together a polished, professional end result where you're not stuttering over your words, where you're not having to worry about, anytime you kind of trip up or need to think, and that being the experience that people are going to have, right? So you're previously recording, you're editing out any kerfluffles that you might have, or twists of your tongue. And then all of a sudden you've got this pretty professional training that's ready to be delivered to whoever wants to buy it. The pros of this are it also allows the students to progress through the content at their own pace. So sometimes, even on trainings like this one that I'm doing today, I'll be moving through content and maybe somebody is sitting there silently praying that the content would just be delivered a little bit more slowly because they're so new that it's too much that's coming at them all at the same time, right? And so this way, a student could literally pause, rewind, go back, listen to it again, and then progress through or watch the videos as many times as they want in their own way. So if they know how they best learn, that really allows them to have the control over their experience, right? From there, these things can be sold over and over again. And if the content is timeless or evergreen, literally, you can leave this stuff up for years without ever having to touch or re-edit that content if it's done professionally, right? So if you've created some really good looking professional videos, like it can be 4, 5, 6 years before you actually have to go back in and redeliver them. And even then, the only reason you're going back in is probably because technology's changed. So like you want the quality of the video to look a little bit better. It's not necessarily that the content itself has changed, right? The cons are that students really do need to be motivated in order to finish those kinds of courses. So a lot of the times, what a lot of course providers who use this model will tell you is that everyone's excited when they first buy the course, right? They'll log in, they'll do that first lesson. And then if there's 15 lessons in that course, by the time they hit 6 or 7, you might not see them again ever, right? And so there needs to be something secondary that kind of remotivates people to finish the content and to get to the end of the course. And so sometimes what that is there's a certificate that they can get if they challenge a little test at the end or something like that. Sometimes what that is they get entered to win access to a different thing, or sometimes it's just a series of emails that you're sending out that's reminding people, oh, hey, I see that you're halfway through this course, right? So This is also very much a learning experience that doesn't work for everyone. If people aren't super motivated or are the types that I say love learning, they'll basically start it, they'll put this course in their library knowing that they can come back to it whenever they want. And then it never really bubbles up to the surface as being something they absolutely have to get through by any point in time. So the next shiny object that kind of passes along their screen, they're like, ooh, I'm gonna do that instead, right? And then also, this content can be a little bit boring or dry if it's only just you recording slides and talking over them. So you want to make sure that, you know, you kind of mix this up with your face being there so that people can see you talking to them. Some point and click content where you're showing them how to do specific things. And then also you're reiterating the major points on a slide. Okay. The pros and cons of the live training and replay model is the content is often seen by students as more engaging when it's live, right? Because the students can ask questions right then and get answers right then. And then replays also allow students to go over anything that they missed in detail. From there, we have delivering live training obviously requires a certain amount of tech ability. You need to be able to diagnose and troubleshoot any issues with your tech. You need to be able to run your PowerPoints or your keynotes on the fly. And you also need to be able to build in time to access the chat, to respond to the students, all that kind of thing. And then if the intention is to package this up and resell it, so you're doing your live training and replay, and then you're gonna post it on your LMS or your LMP and sell this, the Q&A kind of feels like weird to people who aren't actually watching it live. You know, it kind of feels like, oh, I missed out on something. So you'll want to make sure that you're building in opportunities for people to actually ask you those questions and get as close to real-time answers as is possible. And then the pros and cons of the disappearing content training model. So disappearing content forces students to remain accountable while the trainings and replays are available, because they are going to disappear, right? It allows for high engagement and community building as well, because traditionally when you do a disappearing content model, you'll host something like this in a private Facebook group or in a community specific LMP or LMS. And therefore, people want other people to have their questions answered, to feel like they're getting the most out of the content. And it becomes kind of a community push where if certain members of the community are a little bit more advanced in certain areas, they start to answer the questions that the new people or the newcomers to that community are struggling with, right? So it really helps to build this engaged community of people who are going through the same content and having a very similar experience, right? The cons are this one requires the most amount of effort, because traditionally, if you're segmenting your course into those bite-sized digestible pieces of content, that means you're going live multiple times to deliver that content, right? So you have to be going live multiple times, different days. Everyone has to be on the same page of what time you're going to be going live at, how the questions are going to be answered, all of that kind of stuff. And obviously, the more times you're doing a live experience, the more opportunities there are for tech to kind of make your life a little bit more challenging as you're there. So this also requires the most amount of tech skill, right? So if your tech doesn't work, how are you keeping people engaged? How are you making sure that they're staying on until your tech does work? Or is there a backup plan that you have where maybe you filmed a little piece of a video in the event that your tech just isn't going to work that day? That supplemental content that maybe you intended to put up after you're live, but you can put up in place of it if your tech isn't working, right? You want to just be thinking through all of those things. So I didn't put a question slide here, and it looks like it's actually perfect timing for me not to have, but we're just going to get through this slide and there will be a question slide after. Got about 7 minutes left to the training, and I'm like, woohoo, like I was a little worried when we hit the hour mark. I was like, oh, are we going to get through all of this? But we got this. So 3 quick start strategies for getting started quickly, right? There's definitely no get rich quick element here, but there are strategies that can help you making sales much more quickly than others, right? So I always say, start by offering the course or training at a low cost, and you can increase the cost of the course as additional students leave positive reviews. And you can also ask your students to share those reviews online and to refer their friends at this lower cost. If you're going to use a model like this one, the best way to not feel weird about later raising the price is to tell people in the very beginning that you will be raising the price. Okay. So when you start off by offering like a low cost training, if this is your first training, you know, people don't really know you in this arena or this industry yet. You're planning on maybe supporting this training through social media posts and driving some traffic through ads or things like that. And then you start to get your first few people through the doors of your course. You naturally want to say to them, so this course should be valued at whatever you think the real value of the course is, okay? Because you've obviously underpriced it when you're first starting out. And you say, so if you know anybody who would actually really have a hard time or might struggle to pay that higher price, tell them to come in, share it with them now, because this is going to go up as more students come through. Ultimately, the reason it's low price is because I'm brand new to delivering courses, but I've been in this industry for X amount of years. This is my level of experience. And so once this course has proven its weight, we are going to be upping the price of it. So make sure that anybody that you know that might be interested can get in while it's accessible. Okay. And then literally follow through and raise your course price. Okay. Because if you just say that and then you never raise your course price, people just think that you're basically using a marketing tactic to make them buy now. You want to actually raise the course price so that the next time they come, if it's been upped, so say you started your course for $99, it should be $400, right? The next time they pop in, it's $150. They're like, whoa, I should buy it now because it will eventually hit that $400 mark. And then maybe I'm going to have to wait for a sale and that's so much more expensive, right? So you want to be thinking through those things before you start. You also want to be promoting your courses by creating supplementary content that supports the same subject area that your course goes into. So if we're talking about photography for moms, okay, so a lot of moms get into really taking these beautiful pictures of their babies, really while they're on mat leave. So many moms basically become mini influencers that are supporting the local shops for baby clothes and things like that. And so if your course is targeting those moms, maybe, you know, supplementary materials. So say you have a course that's going to show them how to find the right captions on Instagram, how to, you know, frame their portraits properly when they're taking them on their iPhone, what filters look the best, all that kind of stuff. Maybe your supplementary material is the 5 key mistakes new mommy photographers make when they're first starting out, right? And again, you have a little snippet of that you post on your social. It links back to a blog post, which has a little bit more information. And the call to action against that blog post is, if you like this content, check out my course. It's 2 hours of bite-sized digestible content that teaches you everything you need to know to take beautiful Instagram photos, right? And people will buy it because they're interested. Like once they've clicked on that Pinterest thing, they're clearly interested in the content. So as long as the price point matches what they think it should be worth, most of the time it's a no-brainer for them just to buy that course content, right? And so I had a different example there, but same gist. And then you want to start on a platform like Udemy or Skillshare if you're not planning on doing the marketing of your courses, because they market your courses for you. So if you're brand new to both the industry that you are teaching in, and when I say brand new, I mean perceptively to other people maybe in your orbit know that like you're a crafter and that you're an expert level crafter, or know that you're great at organization skills, or know that you build things and you can teach women how to use power tools effectively, right? But like the rest of the world doesn't really know that yet. Starting on a platform like Udemy or Skillshare is going to help you get that street cred, right? Like it's going to help you get those reviews where people are like, oh, this person has 12,000 people that have gone through this course because Udemy or Skillshare has promoted that course over and over and over again, right? And then once you have that following, or that, you know, level of reviews, like I would say basically by the time you've got probably around 50 reviews on a platform site like Udemy or Skillshare, then you're usually pretty good to move off of that platform. Once you're there, you're basically golden, and then people will follow you off of the platform to do your other things. So very quickly, we only have like a minute left. Are there questions?
The pricing question, Dionne, is always top of mind. You mentioned, like, where would you start to price a course? Where would you see it ending? Any quick tips on that?
Yeah, so quick tips on that is basically, I always look at pricing by how much time it's taken me to create the course itself and how long the end result is. So if I'm, for instance, pricing a 6-hour course, I don't think that course should ever be under $100, right? Knowing I'm going to sell it multiple times, sure, absolutely, $100 might seem high to some people, but ultimately, if you've got a 6-hour end result, that's probably taking you 12 to 18 hours to actually put together in terms of creating all of the content, the slide decks, the workshops, the uploading, all of that kind of stuff. And so you want the price point to seem valuable to other people. People don't just spend $100 on everything. You know what I mean? You want it to seem like, oh yeah, I'm going to invest in myself. You want people to get through that content and then ultimately share what they learned or share a review or something like that with other people. So I'd say minimum price to start at for a course that's like 6 hours like that would definitely be $100, $99 in that area. The shorter the content is, the cheaper the course can be. So if you're only running like an hour of videos that are bite-sized, 10 minutes a piece, 6 videos, right? You can sell that all day long for $27. And you're still making a decent profit if you get 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 people to go through it because it's so cheap, right? So you just want to be thinking about what your end goal is for your specific course and for your specific content. I say it's always great to have a mix of some free courses that people can take so they can see your learning or your teaching style and see if it gels with how they like to learn. You want to have some low cost, low entry point stuff. So maybe $27, under $50, right? That allows people to kind of dip their toe into the paid pool a little bit. And then you want to have those higher end courses that are, $500 to $1,000 if you're having the time to actually deliver those courses, right? Because that's, where ultimately you want people to graduate to once they've started with your course offerings. So Michelle says, I price my course regularly at $199 US for a limited time. For limited time, $147. It's a professional nutrition course. And I think that's great. That's a great price point, right? I think people at that price point, people are not just going to buy it and set it aside and not do it. Okay, so very quickly, I know we're a little bit over time. We were 2 minutes past. I want to do the draw for the prize, okay? Oops, I gotta go backwards. So the prize draw, basically, I'm going to send a number. I'm going to pick a number randomly between 1 and 50 that I am sending to Carrie. Do you see it? Okay, so starting, not yet, you are going to just start entering numbers. You can guess multiple times. You're going to enter numbers between 1 and 50, and we're going to look for the right one. Okay, ready? Start. Go so quick, eh? Haven't seen it yet. Keep guessing.
I think I saw it.
Okay, wait, pause.
My God, it goes so fast.
It does go so fast.
Oh, there it is. I believe Sherry Lachine, is that correct? Did you see that one?
Let's hold on.
That feels right. That feels really right.
I have to go look.
I'm just
Okay. Hold on, I gotta go back up to where it started.
Sherry put 39.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. That's it.
Yeah. That was fun, Dionne.
Oh my gosh, it was like, that was like pulling the slot machine. I was like, the numbers were going crazy.
I love it because it's like, it goes really quickly, but then, as the person who's having to look for the numbers, it can be like,
oh my God. Yes, that was it. I'm just confirming she was the first with that number. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so that's correct. So Sherry, you can reach out to me. I'm actually going to put my information up on the slide next. or Carrie can actually share the information with you as well about how to contact me to claim your prize. So if you enjoyed this training, please feel free to stop by my Facebook and leave me a review. I need reviews. So it'd be lovely if you did that. And then feel free to reach out to me directly, either through my website or using this email here that I have linked. Like I said earlier, I am going to go ahead and make these slides available to Carrie so that she can send them out for anybody who might want to go back through the slide content and click all of the links that I built in. And that's it.
And I want to thank you on behalf of the group. I
So
know that everyone's been saying thanks in there. I do want to say we have one more workshop coming up this summer with Dionne that you do not want to miss. And in fact, is very much linked to this topic today. It's actually talking about membership groups. And you'll hear that Dionne did mention a couple of times membership groups. So if you're like, ooh, this might be too much for me, but this other idea might be something I'm interested in. Again, this is a great thing, but you've got to go all in. And it's not free, as you've seen, but it is a great tool that if you actually stick with it, it can bring some pretty amazing results for your business and be a great revenue stream. Membership groups are something entirely different, but I did put into the chat the We Can link again for our upcoming workshops. I believe it's in there somewhere. If you can't find it, just email me or reply to the Eventbrite link. If nothing else, that's how you can find me. On behalf of all of us, Dionne, thank you so much. And I hope everyone learned something new today. I always do. Enjoy your day. Have a good one, guys. Take care.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.